It's working. Everything is working. It's amazing. A miracle. All right. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi brachas. We are relatively in the beginning of Perek Vav, right? Halacha Aleph. We learned in the Mishnah, Keitzad mevarchem ala peiros, and the Gemara began by quoting sources from where we learned that indeed one makes what we call birchas hanahenen, which is a bracha prior to having benefit from this world. In our context, prior to eating, we left off yesterday by learning the first of the four different sources the Gemara is going to offer us here in the Yerushalmi. We learned how it's worded here, simply Lashem ha'aretz u'maloya. We learned the Charedim at the end of yesterday's shir, just seeing how it's really the same, but how the Bavli presents it by showing that there's a stira between Lashem ha'aretz u'maloya and ha'aretz nasam l'vnei adam. But that was where we left off yesterday. We're going to start today on in the Ois V'Hader's edition. We're learning Daf Samach, but we're going to start on Daf Nun Tes Amud Beis. The last word, right, Amar, by the dot, 4 lines before the bottom of the Amud. We're going to learn 3 additional sources, right, for the requirement of reciting a bracha prior to eating. We will also discuss the reciting of a bracha prior to performing mitzvahs. Now, truth be told, it's not something that has to be done prior to the performance of all the mitzvahs. Lamashal, the mitzvah, right? Mitzvah stam is tzedakah. Prior to giving tzedakah, one does indeed not make a bracha, but as a rule, one has to make what we call birchas ha-mitzvahs. So we're going to have some discussion of that, and then the Gemara is going to go back to birchas hanahenen, and the Gemara is going to relate a phenomenal story, and it's a halachic story. It's a story how once one zayis was presented to Rabbi Yochanan. Obviously, prior to eating, he made the bracha. And after he ate that olive, he made what we call the al hapedes, right? Al ha'aretz, al hapedes, which is the rule, parenthetically, that even though generally the bracha achreina, right, for food, for bread, berchas hamazon. For a product that's not halachic bread, but it's made from the 5 grains, al hamichya. For wine, al hagefen. And for the other shivas haminim, we make a al hapedes. So he made the bracha me'ein shalosh. And the question the Gemara will discuss is that when it comes to the bracha after eating, there is a minimum amount, and that is of a kazayis. And the kasha will be fantastic that when you eat one zayis, you don't eat the pit. And therefore, l'choira, and indeed, the share of the kazayis is with the pit. So he ate the olive. So why b'chlal was he chayv to make a after bracha? That will be a topic. We're going to move on to wine because the Mishnah says that on all the peiros ha'ilin you make a boire pri ha'etz chutz min hayayin, that you make a boire pri ha'gafen. We're going to define better wine in the times of Chazal. Whatever was extracted from the grapes was so concentrated that you could not drink it, and you needed to add a lot of water. The average ratio, there were different amoraim that even watered it down more, but tlas lechad, which means that for every 1 portion, you would have 3 of that of water. Is it only after that we consider it wine? Both beneged the bracha of boire pri ha'gafen. We're also going to learn a little bit about using wine for natilas yadayim. We're going to learn the topic whether you are allowed to do it, and if you are allowed to do it, whether it has to be water. But if you water down the wine, even though mitzadecha you make a boire pri ha'gafen, we're going to learn such a svara, since roiv is mayim, it's the last to 1. Even if you hold that you can only use mayim for natilas yadayim, you will be allowed to use that properly diluted wine for natilas yadayim. And if we'll have time, we'll begin the topic, which is fantastic, about what bracha do you make for shem and zayis. And that will be clear, a machlokes between the Bavli and the Yerushalmi, as we will learn inside the Charedim, who many times brings down the Bavli. how in the Bavli a bracha for olive oil is not made. There is a very small exception, as we'll learn. Masha Enkin here in the Yerushalmi, we will learn B'negeya a bracha before olive oil, and a lot more. Without any further ado, Chevra, let's start again. 4-line Daf Nun Tes Amud Beis by the dot, says the Gemara Amar Rabba Bohu. I do want to just quickly go over one word that when we had in the first source, Lashem Haaretz Umaloya, right? That to Hashem belongs the earth and its fullness. This Umaloya will be important for right now. Now we're going to go at Mamash Adrasha, meaning not the Pshat. Ksiv it says, and we're quoting a pasuk in Parshas Kiseitze. The pasuk over there is speaking about the prohibition of having any benefit from what we call kilayim. Kilayim biblically means that when you planted grape seeds, with every mapoila siyad, you put in that together with the grape seeds 2 other zerayim, chita v'sa'ira and the geffen. Biblically, midrabanan, even if you added only one other product with it, and the pasuk says that don't do that. Because pentigdash, now kedusha means holy. Right here, the pshat of tigdash is tukat eish, something that becomes not only asur b'achila, but it becomes asur b'hana. The only solution is burn it. So the pasuk writes pentigdash hamaleya hazera shetizro tvora sakarim, that if you're going to make klayim, then the fullness, the maleya of the seed that you plant and the produce of the vineyard will become forbidden. That's the pshat. The drasha. I know you're going to look in the Charedim, the Pnei Moshe. We're going to go with the Charedim's pshat. We're darshaning 3 words, not 1 word, from Tigdash, from Aleya, and from the Hakarim. So the Tigdash is the Kasha, like Tigdash means Kedusha. Why would Hashem call something that's Asur B'Hana Kedusha? So now we'll see, because there are many meanings to it. Of course, the pshat is Tukadesh, but the drasha will be that Hamaleya, same Hamaleya, the whole world is like something else that's called Kadosh. Now, what else is called Kadosh? The produce of the 4th year. Netaravoy is called Kadosh. Now, Netaravoy is only of the 4th year. But we're going to compare all Maloya to the Kedusha of Netaravoy. And what's the din of Netaravoy? That prior to an action, which is Pidyon. I mean, you can take it to Yerushalmi or you can redeem it. So we're going to learn that there's another solution which is needed to be matir all of the produce. Let's read inside the Charedim. It's better the way. Pentigdash. So really, Zok the Charedim b'klei akerem ksiv, kilei akerem ksiv, and v'darshu boy. And the pshat, the first v'darshu boy is, why did the Torah say pentigdash? That the word akadosh, Tigdash, means tukadesh, and that's something that we learned in the 8th chapter of the Masechtas Kalayim, Mishnah Aleph, that kili akerem asurim l'zreim elakayim v'asurim b'ano ve'en lo pidyon. However, me the afke b'loshen kodesh. Why did Hashem use the word kodesh, which is a very unusual choice of words for something that's asur b'ano? Darshu by derech remes. And guys, we're going to go that the bracha prior to eating is midrabanan. So everything we're learning now is at emes. The chol ha'olam kodesh. How is it kodesh? Like kerem revoy, because by kerem revoy it says ub'shnas adaviyas here called piriyoi kodesh. Oh, everything that now. How do you know that it's kol ha'olam? The Charedim doesn't say, because we had in the previous Gemara and the previous limud Lashem ha'aretz umaloya. Here you have the word hamaleya. It's beautiful. And how is it? What's the last word in the pasuk? Ha-kodim. Actually, the Pnei Moshe emphasizes it's the hey hayidiyah. Let's go. Let's continue reading the Charedim. Yikodim, the Shana Revi'is, the also lach lebilei pidyon, as it says, asher nota kerem v'loy chiluloi. That's another emphasis. And now let's go back in the Gemara. That what that ha'olam kuloi. That's the Malaya. Umaloyoi is make like is kekerem of the 4th year, not kekerem kili akerem. You have to appreciate these drashas. Now, how will you play the netaravoy? Really, netaravoy is not connected to the kerem, but we're using that as an example because the Torah speaks about the kerem, as the Charedim brings the pasuk asher nota kerem v'loy chiluloi. What's the solution? Redeeming it for money. You can't say that prior to eating any food, you have to redeem it with money. You know why you can't say that? Because then what would make Neta Ravoy unique? Like the Charedim writes, the fact that the Torah says that the produce of the fourth year is redeemed through money, implying that not of the fifth year. But now we're learning a drasha that everything needs a pidyon prior. So the pidyon must be, well, it can't be money. It must be a bracha. I mean, no. By Kilei Akerim, there's no pidyon at all. That's what he's trying to emphasize. That's why the Charedim. By Kilei Akerim, there's no pidyon at all. So this is a remes to Neta Ravoy. The word is pidyon. Yeah, but forget about me. There's not shaykh to me. There's no tukta share with me. Okay, let's go to next. Guys, now we're starting on Daf Samach at the top. That was, the people that have issues with Hasidic drushes, they should just learn this Gemara. See how, wow. Now the third, Rab Chizkiya and Rab Yirmiyah and Rab Avon in the name of Rab Shimon Lakish, whom we also call sometimes Reish Lakish. He says like this, Pasuk in Tehillim, right? Tehillim Tezai, that Omart Lashem, you know what the problem right away is? Who knows Ivrit? Omart is Lashon Akeva. Omart. So right away, what the Charedim says, we're going straight into the drasha. The neshama is the wife of God Almighty. We are Knesset Yisrael, right? So when David is speaking to his neshama, I'm having a conversation with my neshama, he speaks b'lashon akeva. So Amart Lashem Hashem Ata. That when you, the neshama, when you listen to the Gewaldigkeit, when you affirm that you are my master, how does the neshama affirm that you are my master? By saying Baruch Ata Hashem prior to eating. When you do that, then in response, it's called the Sarusa de la Sata, Sarusa de la Eila, Toivasi. God says, my goodness, Balolach. And that's a big bracha. So when do we get the bracha? When we before eating, we declare Hashem Ata. Meaning, prior to eating, you make a bracha prior. That's the way we say Hashem Ata, you are my master. So Hashem responds, Kaviyachel, Ki'ilu, Balolecha. Now the first pshat of Balolecha is Ki'ilu, Mishalcha, Ochalta. So in other words, it's though that what you ate is yours. Bal means not. God says, now I can tell you, you didn't eat mine, which is a bad thing, which is what we had in the first drasha. No, now I consider it as if you ate yours. Another meaning of Balolecha. These are all the good consequences of us making a bracha prior to eating. That toivasi Bal Olecha, meaning mevala ani toivasi begufach. Mevala means I will give it my all. When a person here gives it their all, they become exhausted. Of course, God does not become exhausted, and that's the word bal, to be mevala. Mevala means you're worn out. In other words, Hashem is going to say, you know what type of good I'm going to give you if you make a bracha prior to eating? All of it. Ki'ilu, I'm going to wear myself out to give it all to you. Another balolach. That Omar, beautiful, huh? So bal means not. Bal means to be mavala, to worn out, just said. And now the third is Amar Avacha, Mao balolecha. She'eni mevi toiva lo'olam mi balodecha. When you make a bracha prior to eating, it's not just that you'll be blessed. God says it's because of you that good comes into the world. I would not have brought good into the world. Mi balodecha. Where do we have in balodecha? Hashgacha. Next week's parsha Miketz. Kama the At Amar, right? Miketz. That the Pari told Yosef Atzadik that mi balodecha lo yorav ish es yodoy. How great is that? And all of that. Why is that? Because David is telling his neshama that you, neshama, Hashem Ata, you should say, you are my master, meaning make a bracha prior to eating. Now, what's very interesting is that who do you think you have to tell it to? To your body or to your neshama? You would think he would speak to his body. The body has to acknowledge. No, of course, the neshama has to acknowledge prior to eating, and that's a whole Hasidic thing that it's not only that the food is something physical that is mashpia to the body. What we actually learn much deeper, that the moitzi pi havaya that's inside the food, even though it's in a lower life form, that which is lower comes from higher. So there's something that the neshama has to acknowledge. The neshama gets more godliness from the spark of godliness in the food. So even the neshama has to give a bracha prior. Okay, weiter. The fourth, Tanit Abchiyam. So we have in Parshas Kedoshim the pasuk that Abashana Haravis. We're going back now to not to the Voy Mendel Yia Kol Piriyoy Kodesh Hilulam Lashem. Now, what does the word Hilula means? Hilula means to praise, hallow. Hilula means praising twice. We know in the Torah about praising once. When do we praise once? After. But the fact that it says Koidim Hilulim Hilulim Melamed Shutayim Bracha, two hallows. Not only afterwards, Lefanav La'achra. And the same concept that, and why Kodesh? Because if you don't make a bracha prior, it's holy, meaning you can't have it yet. You can't hoye Rabbi Kiva Omer. That lo yitim adam klum ad sheyivarech. And let me just emphasize that the words yitayim is meduyer. As we'll learn soon, bracha achroina, it's not connected to ti'ima. You have to have some level of achila. Midaraisa, v'yosavata, midrabanan, a kavetza, a kezayis, but something, there's a shear, a revius, for after. For prior, yitayim. Now let's go me'inyan la'inyan. Birchas HaMitzvah. Says the one Rabbi Chagai and Rabbi Yirmi. Salkul beis chen vasa. Beis chen vasa is not a name of a place, but as the Charedim points out, according from the Rambam, that Beis Din is chayiv to establish inspectors to go around in every community. Why should they? And they should go around in the business district, in this where there are stores, where vendors are selling items, both to be matzdik the moisnayim, to make sure that the weights are tzedek, are correct, and the measuring utensils are accurate, and to make sure that people are not charging oina'ah, which means that people are keeping the prices in check. That's a chiyuv on the Beis Din, and they were doing that. Now that's a mitzvah. So you have two amoyroim fulfilling a mitzvah together. Kofatz Rab Chagai, he jumped. Ubeirach aleyon, and he made a bracha. Baruch Ato Hashem, Elokeinu melech ha'olam, asher kedishanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu l'saken hamidos ha'moznayim u'l'saken ha'sha'arim. Gewaldig. And Amalei Rabbi Yirmiyah Ya'os Avadato. You did good. Shekol ha'mitzvos to unais bracha. You know how deep the story is? People that keep mitzvahs for them, which is the first step, I'm doing a mitzvah, God is going to reward me. And the Gemara Noch says the words that Kofatz Rab Chagai. What would this colleague say? How dare you decide on your own that you should get the bracha? Maybe I should get the bracha. Didn't care about him not getting the bracha. He cared that God, the Eibishter, got the bracha. You did good. Oh, because the Charedim do this the whole time. You think when a Haredi comes into your store right now and he starts giving you musar, prior to that, he makes a bracha. This is good. That's not good. You know, he makes a bracha. Okay, weiter. Minayin shekol mitzvos to ones bracha. Now, how do you know that? No, that's just the example. You think about Birchas HaMitzvah, guy says, yeah, before you put on tefillin, laniach tefillin. No, this bracha. The inspectors. So Rav Tanchuma and Rabbi Bar Kahana, the name of Rabbi Lazar. Guys, listen, at the end of Parshas Mishpatim, the Torah goes back to Maimed Har Sinai. And it opens up. This is the first pasuk going back to Sinai. That the et nolacha esluchain ha'even in the Chumash Tzritim Mitavav veha Torah veha mitzvah. So that's interesting. So the limud comes from the juxtaposition of, from the Hikish Torah Lemitzvah, which is, and here the Charedim, 10 lines from the bottom, right, guys? We learned this in brachos midoi raisa. Really, it's a machlokes. But he brings over here that you have to, the bracha that we make this morning prior to learning, Berachas HaShachar, the three brachas are really, it's a bracha d'oraisa. The Yalef le'babli le'el, Perik Mishamesoi, that's brachas Chaf Aleph. I'm sorry, Mishamesoi with the lafan of, brachas Chaf Aleph. That means pasuk Kishem Hashem Ekra, pasuk in Azinu, Havu Goida le'lekenu. Some people learn that you have to answer Amen. Kishem Hashem Ekra means here learning Torah. Before you learn Torah, bring Goida le'lekenu, make a bracha prior. And now, actually, the Charedim says, V'chein, you're going to go with the brackets, not with the parentheses. Tama HaRambam, V'sefer HaSugoysev, on the Rambam's being in our mitzvahs, the Ramban is asking, why didn't the Rambam include in the Ramach mitzvahs asay, Birchas HaTorah? In other words, you see here from our Yerushalmi, that it's a doirais, Ma Torah to Nebracha, Af mitzvah to Unebracha. Now this is quite amazing. What's this quite amazing? Ulai. Hekish. A hekish is not a derabana. It's one of the midah shater in the dreshes. Not a midrabana. And that will come out that birchas or ha-mitzvahs is on a higher level, according to this Yerushalmi, than all of the birchas on ahead. Okay. Now, nothing that's learned from the Yud Gimel Mitzvahs is midrabana. Oh, yeah, amazing. No, the Torah came up with the formula. It's very important. Something that's somewhere to Gzeir Shav is not a derabana. That you can be mekadosh bekesev, kicha mistei efren, even though the Rambam says medivrei soifrim. That's the Rambam sometimes uses the words divrei soifrim. That's how they answer. How can the Rambam write that being mekadosh bekesev? The Rambam writes as medivrei soifrim. It's doiraisa. Answer is, it's a doiraisa, but things that are learned, the Rambam, sometimes he words it medivrei soifrim, but it's not a derabanan. Okay, now like we mentioned the story. So we're going back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah said that on fruits, on pri ha'etz, on fruits of a tree, you make a b'ay pri ha'etz. And you know what the Mishnah says? There is an exception. The exception is wine, b'ay pri ha'gofen. Now, I just want to jump ahead a little bit. Why do an exception is if it's of the same thing? You don't make an exception if it's b'chlal not shaykh to that inyan. It's not an exception. It's something else. One might have thought, just to make that clear, that wine is not pri ha'etz. Pri ha'etz is a grape. Then you turned it into wine. You can say that normally for liquids you make a shahakol, that would work. But for wine, it's chashav to make a way to pri ha'gofen. That's not what the Mishnah says. Just to make it clear that we are viewing wine as ha'etz, because the purpose of a grape is for the wine. That's the main. Unlike by other fruits, that's the whole sugya. When you make it into juices. Okay. Now, since the wine is considered the purpose of the grape, so taka, you should have made a b'ay pri ha'etz. Like we learned in the Charedim and we learned in Mishnah, Elama, since wine is chashuv, like bread is chashuv, you make an exception. Okay. Now, Rabbi Yochanan, Nesav Zeisa. He married a girl. He took an olive, and what he did was ubeidach lefanav ula'achrav. Like we said in the intro, guys, don't forget. People forget sometimes, right? People know the Allah Michyan, they know the Allah Gefen, the Allah Pedis, right? Baruch Ata Hashem al haaretz v'Allah Pedis. This is one of the Shivas Hamin. So the bracha after was the Me'ein Shalosh, and v'haver Abchia Barva mistakel bei. And mistakel bei doesn't mean he was staring at him. But like the Charedim writes, he was bewildered. He was like shocked. Right? Kemis mameya. Like, whoa, what are you doing? Now, hold on a second. What Rabbi Yochanan thought, that Rabbi Chia is surprised, like, wow, because he thought that Rabbi Chia thought you should only have made a bracha, but in a fashes. And that's such a wrong concept. Like, everyone should know that for a olive you make a al hapedes. He didn't even want to explain himself. But as the Gemara is going to say, no, Rabbi Chia was shocked, but not because he thought he should have made a bite on a fashes. Of course, he knew you make a al haaretz, val hapedes, because of the shear. That's what the Gemara is going to say. So Amalei Rabbi Yochanan said, Pavloi, lamat mistakel bi, leis loch. Don't you know that kol shum yeshivas aminim, Min shiva, tom bracha lefanav v'la'achrav, meaning you need to have the al ha'aretz, al ha'pedes, or the al ha'gefen, or the al ha'michya. Like he thought that he was surprised because of not the bayit nefashos, but that's not true. Not true meaning Rabbi Chia didn't even respond to him, and that's a good thing. If you're misunderstood, be quiet. He was quiet. The Gemara wants to understand what you think Rabbi Chia Bavar didn't know that. So this is the Gemara explaining that Islay. No, that's the way we're learning. There's so many different ways of reading this. No, Rabbi Chia knew that you make that when you have from any min mishivas haminim, you don't make the bayit nefashos. So umat sricha, the word sricha is used different. What sricha means. So what was bothering him? Why was he bewildered? For something else, because there was the lack of the shir. Now you can make it into a reish. Got in. Gali nosoi mimatoi. Since the olive spit is inedible, and therefore it should be deducted. It should not be included in the minimum share needed. Kum tachois, that Rabbi Yechanan did not have the minimum share. No bracha achrayna should have been said. That's why he was bewildered. Oh, no, that's a big problem. And now the Gemara has to go and explain Rabbi Yechanan. So thank the Gemara for Rabbi Yechanan shegal inosim ematoi. So ma'avle Rabbi Yechanan. What does he do with this issue? Now buckle your seat belts. We don't paskin like this Yerushalmi because we don't have this in the Bible. In the Bible there was another answer. Mipnei beria. Beria means that anything that you are consuming it as God created it. Meaning, in its entirety, that gives it chashivus for you to make a after bracha, whatever the after bracha is, even if it doesn't have the shear, not if it's missing a little bit. Milsi the Rabbi Yechanan, in other words, what are you telling me? That shekain afilu achal pereda achashol anav, even if you're eating one single unit of a grape. Now one grape is less than a kazayis. And I'll tell you more. Oy pereda achashol rimoy. Now that's already gavaldik. Pereda achashol, according to most, means not a section of the pomegranate. Of course, not the whole pomegranate. The whole pomegranate is many kazayis in. One little seed, because we view every little garden in the pomegranate as a beria b'fnei atzma. It's a self-contained unit, and taka no minimum share. You ate that, shehutoin bracha lefaneu lachreo, which is mamash amazing. No. So I want to say like this. No. So like this. There's a whole to do. First of all, let's read inside the Pnei Moshe. There's a big rush in the Rashba over here that has to be explained. But first, let's go with the Pnei Moshe. Says that Pnei 5 lines from the top on the right column. In Pnei Beria, Kolem Beria Shani. V'lo yomru shir kezayis ela b'davar she'ein Beria. Like you're having a slice of meat. You're having a slice of cheese. You're cutting it off something that's whole, but now you only now it's a piece. Now you have to have the minimum amount. Now I want to say like this. There is a discussion on this. The kasha on this answer is, let me go to a pomegranate. I don't know how other people. When I eat a pomegranate, I eat the seeds. When I eat a grape, I eat the seeds. Problem is that Rabbi Yechanan didn't eat a beria. That's the problem on this answer. That's the other way. Because you don't eat a seed. So how can you say, take, that the seed is of the olive, the seed is not edible, so it's a beria, but he didn't eat the beria. So the Rosh says that since it was brought to him as a beria, even though he removed the pit, maybe after he put it in his mouth, it's still considered a beria. And the Rashba says on that nish that it must be that Rabbi Yechanan ate the pit. Now, normally the rule is if you eat something that's inedible, it doesn't count for the shear. But lodatoi, here we say since it was a beria and he ate it, beria. That's the discussion. No, according to the Rashba, even according to the Yerushalmi that holds that when you have a beria, you don't need the minimum shear. That's only if you eat the whole beria. Yeah, or even that, clear. Clearly, according to this Yerushalmi, according to Rabbi Rabbi Meir Abba said of blessed memory, that was his whole microbiotics. The whole microbiotics is based on a thing that the Eibishter puts in every food. Everything, they say everything is good and bad. Everything is good and bad after the chait, but there's enough good in that food to counter the bad, to overwhelm the bad. That you eat it in its entirety. He was telling me, Rabbi Meir, that people think that microbiotics doesn't allow you to eat meat. He said, no. He says, if you eat the whole cow, he left. Mit the bones, mit the hide, then gesund to hate. They don't eat meat because you don't eat the belly. And even in smaller things, the whole thing is to eat the whole thing. That's fit. In other words, a beria, yeah. Okay. Let's go back. So I think when Rabbi Mendel was speaking about a machlokes over here in the place, what to do with the aleph and the pit, what I'm saying is that we don't pass like this Yerushalmi, according to anyone, that if you were to have one little shtickle pomegranate, no one, we don't, there isn't a shita that paskins in halacha like this, that you make a bracha achrayim. And by the Riman, it would have been a me'ein shalosh, just for the record. No one says that. The discussion that you read over there in halacha is you ate the aleph. That's it. So by kazais, you ate the shit. Only question is, you spit the pit out. So people say, according to the Rosh, not because of beria only. No, you ate the you spit out the pit. You put it in your mouth. That's the topic in halacha today. Well, that's important. Let's go back. So chutz min hayayin. Let's get moving. And like we mentioned. So before we're going to move on to the olive oil and see how far we can get it. That's a machlokes Bavli Yerushalmi. Let's speak a little bit about wine. I had the hashgacha pratis. I went to a vineyard not that long ago in another country, and I asked. It was a Yiddish owner, and they made kosher wine there somewhere in Italy. And I asked them about this, that we learn in the Mishnah and in the Gemara that the wine as they made it, you cannot drink it without diluting it with a lot of water, 3-1. Some Amoraim added 4-1. Couldn't explain it. I was trying to understand, like, what changed. Like, they don't know of this. They said, no, you don't have to add water. I said, you don't have to add water? No, you don't have to add water. Actually, there's so many rules about how much water they could add. And at some point, if they added too much water, they can't sell it. You're like watering down your product. So let's go. Yayin, says the Gemara, Bisman shuhu kamay shuhu. Kamay shuhu means prior to mizigas hayayin, prior to diluting it, which was then necessary. Then when they diluted it, they didn't make it worse. It's funny. Today you say you diluted means you ruined it. No, diluting it made it chashuv. So I want to know, if you didn't dilute it, if it's called yayin chai, so it doesn't have that chashivos, why do you make an exception? Why don't you say by the priya eitz because it's chashuv? What about kamay shuhu? So really, machlokes tanoim, this shittas Rabbi Eliezer, he holds taken not chashuv, and therefore, like from our Mishnah, you make a by the priya eitz. And now another rule. That you can't use it for netilas yodayim. Rabbi Eliezer holds that for netilas yodayim you can only use mayim. Now in halacha you have 7 liquids, but not for netilas yodayim. So if it's not mazug, if it's chai, it's concentrated by the priya eitz. Can't use it for netilas yadayim because you can only do that with mayim. Now, bisman shehu mazuk, once you water it down, now you made it into the final product. You can make it by the priya gofen. That's clear. That's the Mishnah. And now comes the chiddush. Even though you're making a by the priya gofen and not a shahakol, that means for birchas hanahanan it's not mayim, it's yayin. Bitzat sheni, the ratio of the meziga was 3-1, was 4-1, which means roiv mayim. So benegeya, the rule of netilas yadayim that demands mayim. Since ruboy mayim, you can use it if you have to. That's a big chiddush, divrei Rabbi Eliezer. However, the Chachamim argue, and the Chachamim hold number one, bein chayu, bein mazuk, you make a boy priya gofen, it's already considered chashuv enough for it to fall into the exception of chutz min hayayin, even when it's chay. And now number two, the Chachamim argue with Rabbi Eliezer, you hold that for natilas yadayim you can only use mayim. I disagree with you. Other mashkin could be used for natilas yadayim, and therefore, even if it is chay, and there isn't roiv yayin, now comes along the Gemara, and both, according to Rabbi Eliezer, when it's mazuk, you can use it. Lachachamim, you can always use wine for natilas yadayim, so that he tells you another detail. Here you can extrapolate. Amar Rabbi Abba, ein boy mishum oivdan oicholin. There is a rule that you're not allowed to waste food. That's not called wasting food, because wasting means using something without purpose. That's the definition of wasting. If there is a purpose, you're not wasting. Would it be wiser for you to use mayim? Of course, mayim is more affordable. But if you don't have, then use yayin. Now, let's hit. So all of this is just the intro. So now, what did we get from all this? Again, we are viewing, if not for the fact that yayin is considered davar chashuv, which is why you don't make a boy priya eitz. If not, what bracha would you make? Boy priya eitz. And actually, we quoted Rabbi Eliezer that not grape, the liquid, prior to meziga, it's not as chashuv as you make a boy priya eitz. Now let's apply this to olive oil, because grape and olive have the similar characteristic, halachic characteristic, that even though it's physically a fruit and people can eat it, but halachically we view the main purpose of a grape for the wine, the main purpose of an olive for the olive oil. So now the question is, when you make the olive into oil, what bracha do you make on the oil? The Mishnah didn't say chutz min hayayin umin hashemen. So Rab says, the Gemara, Rabbi Yaakov bar Zavdi, in the name of Rabbi Bo, from our Mishnah you learn that oimer Allah boire pri ha'etz. Now let's learn, we have time, and this is so important. We learned all of this in Masechta Brachos. So Shemen Zayis is like in middle of the narrow lines. It's probably like 20, 25 lines from the top of the Amid. And here the Charedim wants us to know that this is not like the Bavli. Shemen Zayis says the Charedim, keep your finger right in the Gemara. Habavli in Daflamed Hey, Palig argues with this Yerushalmi. And Va'amar, like this, couple of steps. That when you drink olive oil, which is what the Gemara is talking about over here, klal, no bracha is made, because there's a rule. Guys, we're learning Birchas Hanahen, and it's mamish geshma, because the azuki mazikli, anything that's mazik you don't make a bracha for. I want to know whether you make a bracha on sugar, on candy, on ice cream. According to the Bible, you don't. It's mazik you. I don't think. What do you think? The person drank it. Do you think the person didn't experience something geshmak? Why would he drink it? It had gone to his head. No, he's doing it. He's eating something, and the Torah says, "No, this is hurting you." You don't make a bracha. Now let's further. Elama. How do people eat olive oil? No, they dip the bread into it. Let's go back to the Italians. For that, you never make a bracha on the olive oil, because there's another rule that whenever you eat two food products together, if there is a clear ikin and tafel, if there is the primary food and the secondary food, you make one bracha on the primary food. Since pas ikin, so ve'ein mevarech el ala pas. And by the way, that's not only because when you make a pas, it includes everything in the meal. So that's the rules that we learned. It's ikin, tafel, ikin. Now, how did people have olive oil, at least over there in Bubble? That's the healthy way of having it. They would drink it al yidei anigorim. What's anigorim? So I'm a Russian. One of the Vladis here, also Bashgacha Prat, is borscht. If your mother is Russian, you probably don't like borscht for the amount of borscht that you were forced to have, in a good way. That was out of love. So they would have borscht, and they're beets. You soak it in water, and you add oil. When you have, that's called anigorim. That's mayim shesholka behem teradin, and you should know Listen to this, guys. This is amazing. What bracha do you make for barsh juice? But priyadama. I'll say for the hers. And he got an iked. Even in there, the iked is the barsh. Umevarach boire priyadama. David is saying why you're having the barsh liquid, because there's another rule that the mei shalakos. See, there's shalakos means not cooking. When you overly cook, when you there's a better word in English, it will come to me. Shalakos means that you put the beets in the water and it cooked for many hours. So all of the nutrients and the red went into the water. That is kishalakos. For a beet, you make a bar priyadam. The halachas you make for barsh juice, bar priyadam. And when you add oil, vayte bar priyadam. What the Charedim is pointing out is that what are you talking about ha'etz for olive oil? When? Ella kimevarach. When b'chlal would you make a bracha? Dafka heicha the choishish begroine. Person has a throat ache, and he's drinking a little bit l'refuah. As we learned in Masechta Shabbos, don't gargle with shemen. He's a haraya from there. That's a refuah, and you don't take a refuah on Shabbos. And right? To have a shemen ikir, whatever you're gargling with, it wasn't only oil, but it was roiv oil. If not, you will. That will be the only. So that is according to the Bible. In other words, it's a very limited scenario, b'chlal, where you would make where we have to discuss what bracha do you make on the oil. It's either mazaku or it's a tafel. In the Yerushalmi, we don't have all of that, because they held maybe taka lahavdol to Yidden Yerushalmis go to Italians. They don't drink olive oil? Maybe they do. Maybe they have a little lachaim on olive oil with the garlic in it. I don't know. David is looking at me. So just to be aware of that. The point is that, see, you can argue when you learn this without the Charedim. No, maybe that's what the Yerushalmi is referring to. No, but he doesn't say that. The Charedim understood that the Bavli Palik, because we're not giving that. And by the way, even the last case that we have in the Bavli that you would gargle and you would swallow, it wasn't pure olive oil. No one did that. So here he's saying Rabbi Yaakov Bar Zavdi, Shemen Zayis Oimer olive oil priya eitz, and Amar Rab Chia Bar Papa Kumi Rab Zeira. Good gesagt. You said good, because Umas Nisa Amar came. Yes, I can prove that he's right from our Mishnah, like we spoke out already, Balpeh, which is the Mishnah says from all the Peiros Ha'ilon you make a very priya eitz. What's the exception? Chutz min hayayin, and on yayin you make very priya gofen. Now the Gemara is asking, hold on, why is that even called an exception? Like, you can say that you don't make a shakal on yayin. Yayin is not priya eitz, because the yayin lav shachuk, who is it not pressed, meaning it's already transformed into a liquid. But v'loy omar, that's v'loy mar elo chutz min hayayin, meaning that we don't view its liquid state to be any different than its solid state. It is considered the same. And therefore, if you're based on the klal, the bracha should have been a bayra priya eitz. On that, the Mishnah says, I have an exception. Now, what exception did the Mishnah give? Yayin, which implies ashar kol advarim af al pi sheshchukim hein. They are considered be'einon hein. At least that we can learn. Even though they're pressed, they are considered to be in their original state. And we didn't say chutz twice. Beautiful. Ubemela. Right? Let's go inside. Deloy tema. Like we spoke out, they keep him the nischak. Hazayis avalamayim. And maybe only shahak. But the Mishnah didn't say that. No, a wine should have been very priya eitz. It's not, because it's an exception, but that's the only exception. Now, even though we say ein lemedim and aklolis, even when you say chutz, doesn't matter. He's learning that, that the Mishnah would have said chutz min hayayin and hashemen. The Mishnah doesn't say it. Let's stop over here. Is that that when you drink olive oil, the bracha that you make, according to the Yerushalmi, is a bayre pri ha'etz. And what bracha achrayna do you make? Al ha'aretz v'al ha'peiros. To be continued. Guys, this is the Birchas Sanhedrin. We are in it. We are in it.